Today's episode is brought to you by the Whole Life Decluttering Workshop, featuring a proprietary 6-step system, the Simple System, to help you declutter your life in a way that will last. Purchase this workshop on demand and receive the video training and dedicated workbook at positivelyproductive.com/resources. In the last 2 episodes, we talked about 2 clutter-related topics. The first on how your home office can make you more productive, focusing on the physical side of clutter and design, and the second on digital clutter, which a lot of listeners responded to in a big way. Now we're stepping back to review a framework I created many years ago to help clients declutter in a way that works for them. There are so many systems out there and experts advising you how to declutter, and much of what they share is good advice. It's just not necessarily good advice for you. The only way to know what is for you is by creating your own framework, which is one of the things I do as a coach and what I'm going to help you with today. Now let's dig into the acronym SIMPLE to declutter any space in your life and to do it in a way that will last. You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zawrotny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a productivity coach certified in positive psychology and stress management. Join me as we explore ways to live a more proactive, positive life with episodes on productivity, self-awareness, mindset, entrepreneur life, habits and systems, simplicity, fun, and more. I understand overwhelm personally as a multi-passionate entrepreneur, wife and mom to kids and cats, and as a caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and as I record this episode, we're in one of the biggest decluttering months of the year. While I'm always one to say we don't have to do things at specific times of the year, I most definitely encourage the theme of decluttering at any point and appreciate its effectiveness at the beginning of a season. It's a great way to have a fresh start and to make space for what matters and what you want to invite into your life. In the last 2 episodes, we talked about 2 clutter-related topics. The first on how your home office can make you more productive, focusing on the physical side of clutter and design, and the second on digital clutter, which a lot of listeners responded to in a big way. Now we're stepping back to review a framework I created many years ago to help clients declutter in a way that works for them. There are so many systems out there and experts advising you how to declutter, and much of what they share is good advice. It's just not necessarily good advice for you. The only way to know what is for you is by creating your own framework, which is one of the things I do as a coach and what I'm going to help you with today. When I started Positively Productive Systems, I served my clients as a professional organizer. Working primarily with residential clients, I went into their homes and helped them sift through it all so they could make space for what mattered in their lives. We reduced the amount of stuff overwhelming them and set up the systems and habits to help them stay organized, keep the clutter at bay, and live how they wanted to live. I could see clearly the mental and emotional weight of clutter and how much of that needed to be addressed first before changes could be made. I also saw the differences in each and every client and how we had to approach the clutter and organizing very differently. Here are some examples. Client A had a collection of magazines that filled a corner of her living room. This collection was caused by her love of learning and exacerbated by her fear of missing out, often referred to as FOMO. So she struggled to toss any unread magazines away, yet time wasn't permitting her to read them at a pace that worked for her, and they were collecting. It reminds me a little bit of the I Love Lucy episode where the chocolates are coming down the conveyor belt and at first it seems fine and then they start to pile up and she's trying to tuck them into her apron and eat them and do anything she can to handle them. It sounds funny, but when you have clutter piling up around your life, it can actually be paralyzing, and it was for her. We had to embrace her desire to collect information while mitigating her tendency to collect whole magazines and hang on to them indefinitely. It was important to honor what she loved and acknowledge where she was at the time. She and I worked to create an organizing system that allowed her to properly use and immediately donate the magazines, keeping only certain articles. This did involve doing a full inventory of the types of magazines and assessing what she could live without and what she wanted to continue. It also involved scanning those that mattered. It was a practice in reducing the scope of the collection, practicing small bits of missing out and being okay with it, and finding what really mattered to her. We explored different ways for her to research and learn so she could reduce what she brought into her home, and we successfully reduced multiple boxes to one folder of articles. Client B had years of product and accessories built up from an MLM company. So we were dealing with a combination of perceived need, guilt at collecting so much that wasn't used, and issues of sunk cost. If you've ever heard of the term sunk cost fallacy, that's something I want to discuss on the podcast. It's where you hold on to things because you've invested so much, you want to get that investment back. But many times that's a fallacy. It's not possible. And in this case, it definitely wasn't going to happen. So the first thing we had to address was how to maximize the usage of what she already had so she didn't feel wasteful, and how to reduce incoming product. We inventoried and grouped all of it, documenting what she had and considering ways to use or release it. Donating to others who needed what she had, especially others on her team, helped her feel that same sense of purpose that drove her to make those purchases. And having a plan to use what she had left helped us feel confident in her using up the product to get to a point where she could maintain an acceptable amount for her space and her life. Now, client C had tons of clothing and toys for her children to the point where it was overflowing. She had multiple rooms in a large house and was still overflowing in clutter. And if you've ever cared for children, you know it's actually easy for something like this to happen in many ways. But this client did so at a significant pace, along with an extreme aversion to releasing any of it because of guilt and trauma. She had struggled to have a family and had responded to this experience by never saying no to herself, to her children, wanting to give her child everything. It's a beautiful sentiment. But it's also a clutter trap. We needed to acknowledge and process these reasons, along with identifying clear boundaries for the rooms in her home, which she would use for family experiences instead of storing things. And it essentially helped her override her desire to collect by giving purpose to each space for living with the family that she had. Over the years, as my role with clients has shifted from on-site, hands-on work to coaching the person and helping them do the inner work, I discovered the steps I took naturally with each of them had a similar framework, and I knew I could share that with you so you could create your own decluttering framework. The examples that I use touch upon the elements of this framework. Maybe you'll recognize them as we go. The framework I designed almost a decade ago and have been sharing with hundreds of clients is called the Simple System. One of the first episodes I did on the podcast is about it. And in fact, I share details on what clutter is and why we want to remove it, as well as how to do so with the Simple System. It was a good introductory episode to this. So if you are curious about types of clutter and what clutter does to you, you may want to check out that episode. And there are definitely many episodes following where I repeat different aspects of those details in varying degrees and with different clutter contexts, if you will. I've done many workshops as well on the Simple System itself. It's been so popular, I created an on-demand version called Whole Life Decluttering, Make Space for What Matters. In this 60-minute workshop, you'll learn what clutter actually is, its links to stress, types of clutter that affect your whole life, and my proprietary 6-step system, the simple system that we're talking about today. You can find that on-demand workshop on the resources page of the positivelyproductive.com website, and I'll link to it in the show notes as well. Now let's dig into the acronym SIMPLE to declutter any space in your life, and to do it in a way that will last. The SIMPLE acronym stands for Set, Identify, Match, Pair, Limit, and Evaluate. To use it, you want to first select the space in your life that you want to declutter. It can be almost anywhere, any kind of space. And it doesn't have to be physical, but if you're new to decluttering, that may be especially helpful for you. So it's an excellent place to start. And I will give some examples here, and then I do offer more variations in the on-demand workshop. And for this episode, I'll use decluttering your kitchen as an example. So the first step, set. Think of it this way. You want to set yourself up for success. Just as with cooking, where chefs do something called mise en place, which is a French culinary term that means putting in place. You want to make sure you've put everything in place so that you're ready for this project. You want to set your mind to the task. You want to set up your space and your tools to make this a success. Here's some things you want to think about. Your schedule, set a time or multiple times for you to work on this project, letting your family know. Put it on the calendar. You want to set goals, maybe having certain areas in your kitchen or your pantry specifically done by a certain time or a certain event. You want to figure out ways to track your progress. Ask for help. Get people involved. You'll definitely want to document the before so that you can see your progress. And this is important when you have multiple days that you're working on something or bigger projects where it can be easy to think you haven't done that much, especially when cabinets are closed, which is also a quick way to make a space look neat, but we all know what's going on inside the spice drawer, am I right? So get your tools ready, for example, a notebook to track progress and assign tasks, garbage bags and bins if you're decluttering physically, and donation schedules and pickups. Get all of those set so that you're ready to go. In the case of a kitchen declutter, you'll want to set aside time, ensure you have leftovers and prepared food or takeout options for meals, depending upon how much time you're going to need, how big the kitchen is, and the decluttering tools you'll need, such as sorting bins and signs and so forth. If you have donation options to prepare, that's great too. And you'll want to take some photos of the spaces, including the kitchen as a whole and inside the cabinets. Step 2 is identify. You want to create a filter for your decisions. This is going to be the driver of all the remaining steps. This is your why for the space and for the decluttering. When you create a guideline for what belongs and what doesn't, it makes the decluttering that much easier. Here's where you want to ask yourself how you and your family, or whoever's living with you, wants to live in this space. You want to ask yourself who you want to be in this space and what purpose the space has. If you stop to think about it, even though most spaces in a home, for example, seem fairly obvious, depending upon the family, they can actually vary quite a bit, and that's why it's essential that you define it. With a kitchen, the purpose seems straightforward at first, but this is also how you live. If you have a family like mine, the kitchen is not only a space for cooking, but it's also for regular eating, because keeping it real, our dining room is rarely used for eating. It always has a puzzle on the table. We use our kitchen table for eating dinners together, for family meetings, and for homework and special tutoring sessions. And this is the room where we have our command center and whiteboards to remind us of what's happening. I have 2 teens who are involved in a lot of music at school and a lot of events, so there's always some kind of permission slip or detailed information that we have to have up and ready and waiting so that we know what's going on. We also use the kitchen for their backpacks and for prepping for a school day, since we don't have a functioning mudroom for that purpose. So, as you can imagine, It's not only a place that holds food and cooking related equipment, it needs to hold so much more to keep everything for our day to day lives running smoothly. Step 3, the M in simple, is match. You want to match up things to see the big picture. This is the first tentative step before the true decluttering happens because you need to know what you're actually working with in order to make informed decisions. And as a bonus, this can remind you of things that you had that you may have forgotten and give you a chance to prioritize their placement in your storage so that you can use them better in the future. You want to capture all items in a category for sorting. Professional organizers will use the phrase like with like, so that's an easy way to remember. And then you compare everything once you have all of these things that are similar together. In our kitchen, a fantastic example of the need to match like with like is water bottles. Is that familiar to you too? I swear they multiply overnight, and I know that my affinity for them is part of the problem. Anyhow, we have a set that we keep in our kitchen, and we also have a set that we store for other purposes, for special trips, for hiking, for things like that. And then we have our day-to-day water bottles that we use for school and that I keep at my desk. So when I declutter, I need to pull them all out to properly assess what we have, make sure we have things stored in the right place, and then choose based on that. That's the benefit of matching like with like before you make your choices. Now we are on to the P of simple, and that is pare, as in P-A-R-E, as in reducing. Now's the time, after you've created all these filters and guidelines, that you are actually going to reduce. This is where decluttering, as we think of it, actually starts in the process. Yeah, midway through. And now we are really digging in. However, we're going to be so much more productive about this decluttering because of all the pre-work that's been done. Now that you have a purpose for the space and parameters, you can make your choices. Sometimes it's easy when something is broken or obsolete. You've outgrown something, no longer use it, no problem. Sometimes it can include identifying things that simply do not belong in a specific space, but could be stored elsewhere. So it's not always about getting rid of things. It's about finding the right places for them. And it's about working in this space that you're in and playing by your rules. Step 5 is to limit. This is where your container controls the amount you keep. While pairing is the true decluttering, and you want to do as much as you can with that, be as aggressive as you can with it, limiting by space size is what's essential to have the optimal amount for where you live or for what you're doing. And only you can determine that. If you live in a one-bedroom apartment in the city, your limit for storage is far different than a farmhouse in the country. But also you want to consider what your personal clutter limit is. For example, I had a client who felt like anything on the counter was clutter, whereas I like the functionality of having my coffee maker right out and ready. And I also like containers with utensils that I can grab different ones to quickly cook because I cook quite a bit for my family. I don't consider those clutter. I consider it functional and I make them look nice. But for some, that would be visual clutter and they need everything removed. As you can imagine, if you want your counters that clean, because that is what you need for your personal clutter limits, then you'll be more limited in what you can keep based on the size of your cabinets. Now, if you have a very large kitchen with many cabinets, it might not be as noticeable, but in a regular kitchen, you are going to need to make the cabinet storage work for everything. And step number 6, our final step, is to evaluate. And what I mean by that is you want to repeat the process and prevent the clutter. So after you go through this process, you want to check and see what worked and what didn't. Sometimes you need to review your limits again and be even more aggressive. Try again and declutter even more so that it fits better. And, whatever you try, be sure to take this time to appreciate the work that you've done. And I know if you're like me and you've decluttered a space, you'll probably walk by it a lot and admire it. So definitely do that. Evaluate what you've done, appreciate what you've done. And if something needs to be changed, go ahead and make a plan to do that. And in that case, you may want to start the process over, but it'll go much more quickly each and every time you do it in the same space. Now, evaluating also relates to what comes in. It's a way to prevent clutter before it starts, so you don't quickly undo the work you put in. And if you've ever done an amazing job of organizing a space and you're just like, oh, look at this. And then what feels like minutes later, it's suddenly overflowing again. You know how important this step is. So do your best to check the work that you've done and check what comes in so you don't undo the work. So those are the 6 steps to a simple decluttering approach. But there is one more thing to consider when doing this, and that is something I just mentioned, which is the framework not only helps you declutter, it's meant to be repeated. Even in the same room, you may find the purpose of the room shifts as your life shifts. And if you downsize your space, you downsize your home, your limit will change. So use changes in your life and cues when you notice clutter creeping in to repeat these steps. Now that you have the simple steps, what space in your life are you going to declutter first? Message me and let me know. I have listeners and followers message me frequently sharing photos of decluttering projects and their progress, and I love cheering them on. And I'd love to do the same for you. If you could use more support, I encourage you to check out the on-demand workshop on the resources page. And if you'd like to speed things up even further, it may be time to move past the DIY to virtual organizing. This is where we can go through these steps together in an online coaching session, and I can guide you past the areas that trip you up and help you get further faster with this project. If you'd like to know more about this or any kind of coaching, start by scheduling a free coaching consultation call, which you can book by going to the Connect page of the positivelyproductive.com website. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'm excited to help you make space for what matters. Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback or questions, you can find me through the Connect page of the positivelyproductive.com website. And if you're looking for any of the resources mentioned here, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.